added, and they can move into manufacturing, which all African countries have actually failed to do. So these are the important components. But there's another very important factor: working together. Because when Niger had its coup in 2023, and Tiane came into power, and Bazoum was overthrown, he was also embraced by the populace, because he also was duplicating the same language that was coming from Mali, that was coming from Burkina Faso. We must take control of our resources. Let me give you an example. France, essentially all the uranium that France uses comes from Niger. France relies on nuclear energy for 75% of its energy. France's per capita income is 40 plus, like 45,000 per year. In Niger, the per capita income is under $700. How can that be? How can the country that is producing the minerals that essentially empowers and enriches France have that kind of, the ratio is about 60 times. So France per capita income is about 60 times higher than Niger. That situation cannot maintain. So they've stopped exporting the uranium to France. They're dedicated to negotiating new arrangements. So basically, all these countries are doing what Patrice Lumumba attempted to do in 1960. When he came to power, elected democratically, became the first prime minister, he said, we need to renegotiate. At that time, copper was the biggest mineral. Now there are 10 other valuable minerals competing with copper. Copper is not even highest now in the value chain in Congo. By that time, it was copper. So Lumumba told Belgium, we need to renegotiate these contracts so that the resources of the Congo can benefit the Congolese. Of course, the rest is history. We know what happened. Brutally assassinated, killed, and then they imposed Mobutu. This literally a military and political monster imposed on the Congo and maintained in power for 37 years. So now, to avoid that kind of fate, which was suffered by Lumumba, which was suffered by Sankara, these three countries are working together. And once again, they're learning the lesson from Sankara. Sankara, at the Organization of African Unity meeting, which of course was the organization that preceded the African Union, in Addis Ababa in 1987, said, comrades, we need to eliminate this foreign debt. Otherwise, we cannot develop. We will have no money to spend on our economies. But if I renounce the debt alone, I will not be alive to attend next year's OAU summit. Let's do it collectively. They cannot assassinate 54 African leaders. And if you want, you can go on YouTube and Google Thomas Sankara, OAU conference, 1987, foreign debt. If you put these keywords, if you go to YouTube, you will see the video. He speaks in French, but there's English captions. And he said it, he predicted his death. Let's make a collective statement on the debt. They did not. That was July, October 15, Sankara was dead. So now these three leaders are trying to avoid that. They've come together into the Alliance of Sahel States. And it has been working so far in terms of ensuring that their life is not exterminated. So far, anyway, because the enemies of Africa never give up, right? When Niger had the coup in 2023, ECOWAS gave the new government there 2 weeks. And ECOWAS, of course, was just amplifying what France was saying in the background. It was France speaking through ECOWAS. 2 weeks, 2 years later, they're still in power. And how were they able to accomplish this? They came out with a joint statement, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, saying an attack on any one of these countries will be considered an attack on all three of us. and we will take collective defensive military action. And that is what has worked. And this, now, the entire continent is watching this. The youth are watching this. And we have, of course, the proof that they're watching this. Because recently, when General Langley, who is the head of AFRICOM, I think it was on April 3rd, he had a testimony before the Armed Forces Committee in the US Congress. And he accused Traore of using the country's gold for self-benefit, to benefit his regime. Like, how dare an African country use its own resources to benefit an African government, right? So this is against US interests. And normally they start demonizing you like that before they go after you and they eliminate you. So the result of that statement, I'm sure all of you saw the kind of global protest in support of Burkina Faso and Traore. Online, in person, digitally, it was worldwide. You see? What does this mean? This means that the African youth, because Africa is a continent of youth, right? They want effective change. They're not saying, is Traore wearing a military uniform or is he wearing a suit and a tie? What they're saying, is Traore delivering to the people? Is Goita delivering in Mali? Is Tichane delivering in Niger? These are the questions that they are asking. And this is putting pressure on the other countries in West Africa and in other African countries as well.
Yep.
You don't have to be in a military uniform to deliver. Look at what happened in Senegal. In Senegal, they were watching what was happening in these countries to kick out the French influence, to take control of their resources. Senegal ended up blocking an attempt by France to prolong its hegemony by getting, at the president at the time, Macky Sall, to continue his regime. So the young people organized a movement, national protest. Even though he arrested the leaders still won while they were incarcerated. Just think about that. They were becoming even much more popular. So that's how you ended up having President Faye now in Senegal. And they're doing the same things that the men in uniform are doing in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, taking control of their resources. And this is also having sort of like a multiplier effect or domino effect in other African countries, including in Uganda. People want governments that can deliver. So that's why I like the presentation that was shown on video before I started speaking. And I like the way that the presenter has set it up. He says that we have the indomitables who are dominating everything. And everybody else, the masses, are just space fillers. But now the indomitables have seized so much that the space fillers have no choice. Otherwise, they will be pushed off the cliff. And I agree with him, absolutely. We have no choice but to end this regime of terrorism that we have in Uganda. It's a regime of terror. And if you go back and you do research, you'll find that military dictatorships, when they're becoming weaker and weaker, and they see that demise inevitable, they resort to this type of terrorism, of abducting and torture, kidnapping, just to create a sense of mass terror from the populace, not knowing that they're actually, since, as Kaboleta said, people have no space to run, you're going to force people to defend themselves and do what they should have done actually a long time ago. Get rid of this military terrorist regime in Uganda. So now you see the contrast between what is going on in West Africa, even though these are men in uniform, they've been embraced by the populace, so they're part of a movement. In Uganda, in contrast, you have these men in uniform, particularly, of course, Museveni and Muhoozi. They are actually the enemies of the people. They're trying to block the mass movement. They're trying to block the space fillers, as Kaboleta said, from coming to power. And I don't think they'll succeed. Do the research, look at Chile under Pinochet. He unleashed the same type of terror, using state institutions to kidnap, to hijack. People were disappearing. The same thing in Argentina under General Videla, using the state instruments of terror, the military and the armed forces and the police and other shady people that were not in uniform, but armed people like the ones we have in Uganda as well. So Uganda is basically, Museveni and Muhoozi are copying a template that was previously used in Argentina and in Chile. And we know how it ended up in Argentina and Chile. In both cases, the dictatorship eventually was pushed up. I think in Uganda, we're getting toward that level as well. So I would like to stop at this point so that we can have time to engage in conversation, because that's what I like doing. But let me just make maybe perhaps one more point. We have to observe what is happening, and we have to use whatever we can in our own struggle to benefit us. So I know many of you will not like it when I say this, but it's true. While you could see and say Gaddafi was a dictator in Libya, Gaddafi is popular in many parts of Africa and the world. And why is that? Daddy! Because he put the resources back into the economy. The billions of dollars in oil wealth he put back into the Libyan economy, and not only the Libyan economy, we know for a fact that other African countries also benefited from Libya's billions, including Uganda as well. So as a result of that, Gaddafi is actually popular. In fact, even in Libya now, the reason why they've not held elections, because the Western countries that now support the transitional government in Libya know that Saif al-Islam Gaddafi would actually win, Gaddafi's son. And that is why they do not want to hold elections. So the big point is that not only do Ugandans resent Museveni and Muhoozi because there are men in uniform, because they're dictators, because of all the crimes they've committed, but their biggest cardinal sin, they've not been able to provide for Ugandans. Instead, they've been looting from the national treasury. Remember what Museveni said when he came to power. He said, these African leaders are useless. They've not been able to produce a needle in all the years in power. This man has been there for 40 years. Where is his needle? What does he produce? So why am I bringing Gaddafi's name now at this stage? Gaddafi was betrayed by Museveni. The WikiLeaks memos that shows that Museveni, while pretending to be Gaddafi's friend, taking all the billions from Libya, was actually informing on him to the CIA and other Western intelligence sources. The memos are there. WikiLeaks memos reveal this. So we need to use this. That not only is this man and his son betrayed Ugandans, but he also betrayed another African ruler. The country eventually was invaded by NATO and destroyed. Look where Libya is today, like in the 19th century, compared to where the economy was before the NATO invasion. We need to remind other Africans that it was Museveni who sold out Gaddafi. Because Museveni enjoys propaganda. He goes around calling himself a Pan-African, pro-African unity and all that, when in fact, he's one of the biggest enemies of Africa. And Africans need to know that. So that's one of the things we need to do. I have some other thoughts and ideas of what we could do collectively that I'll be happy to discuss once we get into a conversation. So thank you, sisters and brothers.
Thank you so much, Professor Alimadi, for your teaching. Once again, we are very grateful to have you here. You've always imparted knowledge. Thank you so much. And guys, I hope thanks. Guys, I hope you're hearing clearly. Godfrey, I see your hand is up. Yes. Was it Okay, Godfrey, please come in.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dorcas. Good morning, Professor
Good morning.
Dr. Milton. Very nice to see you again.
Thank
With
you. Thank
your
you. Just
wisdom,
call me Milton.
as ever. Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
I've got a quick question.
Yes.
Why do Ugandans expect someone else to liberate them or to fight
Thank you.
their battles?
Thank you for that
Can
question.
you pinpoint where the problem comes from?
Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, so that's a very good question because my Nigerian friends, my Nigerian friends really are always putting a lot of pressure on me. They say, Milton, there's no way could we have a Muhoozi and a Museveni in Nigeria. You see? So the way I might explain it is that, as you know, Ugandans have gone through long periods of what they've seen, of what war can do to a country. But even then, I think everything and everybody has a limit. I think Ugandans are coming to that limit. As a Kabuleta said in his presentation, you have no option now but really to fight for your rights. Otherwise, you're going to be pushed off the cliff. You see? I don't want to say that, some people said, oh, Ugandans are not brave, Ugandans are not courageous. That's nonsense. We are the same African people that you find in Nigeria, that you find in Burkina Faso, that you find in Mali. In fact, Burkina Faso itself did not have a history of intervention and people knowing that they can actually affect their destiny until Sankara came into office. Just think about that. So all that dormant energy had been there waiting for the right ignition, you see? And Sankara did that. And then they developed that tradition of intervention. It took a long time because France maintained a very strong military presence to maintain Compaoré in power. But they had their limit. When Compaoré at one point after 27 years wanted to extend his rule, the people said enough is enough spontaneously. They came before parliament could vote to extend his power. They burned down the parliament building just to show how outrageous they were. The next day, Compaoré was in a French helicopter fleeing the country, you see? So I believe in Uganda, there's so much pent-up rage and energy, and I believe now Muhoozi is doing a very good job providing us with that spark, with his outrageous abuse and boasting of torturing another human being. I think we are getting to that spark in Uganda as well. And I see that liberation is inevitable. And there are other good signs, by the way, that you don't just have to, think, oh, Milton is just speculating. You have to read what is happening also on the economic front. The oil thing is one of the biggest deals. Last year, the regime lied and said China was going to give the regime $3 billion, as if the Chinese government are just fools who are not watching whatever is happening in the ground in Uganda and in other African countries. Why would China commit $3 billion to a regime which China knows is not going to last? That loan has not come through, and you notice they're not talking about that $3 billion loan as well. And without that money, they will never be able to accomplish this pipeline. This pipeline is not going to be accomplished while Museveni and Muhoozi are still ruling Uganda. I hope that answers the question in a roundabout way,
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor. Oh my God, because I was about to say, I really like the fact that this young man, he's so unapologetic. He stood firm, and of course, he's restoring. We can see the hopes of his fellow countrymen, but also he's thinking of Africa at large, you know. So I really like the courage, and for me, the way he's standing firm and speaking against that external control, you know, the corruption and all. Oh my God, it is really amazing. Yeah.
Correct.
So
because sister, look at it this way.
yeah.
When African countries were winning their independence, you know, Lee Kuan Yew, the Prime Minister of Singapore, was very envious. He said, look at all you countries with all your resources, and we have nothing in Singapore. He was telling this to people in Nkrumah, very envious. And in 1959, the per capita income of China was about $90. This is according to World Bank statistics, right? Ghana was 180, double. Think about that. But what is the difference? China took control of its resources and kicked out imperialism. And that is why China today is a superpower. Africa has not been able to accomplish that. And that's why, in spite of all our resources, we also have the most impoverished citizens in the world. So what the Sahelian states are doing, they're showing the template of what Africa needs. Even if you don't formalize the union, formalize the alliance, work collectively, don't undermine each other. And then you'll start seeing the changes and the results. There are some economists who estimate that if Africans were getting what they deserve for their resources, the value, and they change the trading pattern and they're allowed to manufacture, right, build factories, it would take 15 to 20 years for Africans to really have developed economies. That's not a long time. Most of you young people will still be around.
Oh my God. And it is really sad because on the other hand, we're seeing how Uganda is being swallowed up, obviously, by the system. These thieves, you know, they thrive on the greed and, you know, the way they're torturing people. It's bizarre, you know. So it is really amazing. Guys, please, let's take the hands quickly so that we get Professor to respond. I'll take all the hands and then Professor, you respond. Sister Mimi, sure. Please do come in. The chat is open, guys. In case co-hosts, watch out for the bombers. Otherwise, yeah. Sister Mimi, please do come in.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Professor. Mine is kind of a multiple question in one.
Okay.
Long time ago, when I was growing up, when South Africa had apartheid,
right,
many countries, African countries and the global world had this in their passport. You travel everywhere except Africa. Except South Correct. Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, so right now, like for a person like Captain Toro, Ibrahim Toro, that is a different breed of Africa, leader, whereby, so there was that, going back to the passport thing, there was that unity of African countries against the apartheid. And right. Around the world, you know, there was that unity against, against South Africa, you know, the apartheid in South Africa. So right now, we do not have that. I don't see that in African countries right now. You know, many of these African countries have dictators, and there's that lack of us Africans supporting like somebody like Captain Tuori, because like, for example, one of the posting that I saw is that, he's also a dictator, you know, he's not, so that what they mean that he's not a dictator because he's not allowing elections to take place in the country, and the fact that he's has a military background, or he took over power via military, why isn't he? So I'm wondering, this guy, within a short time, he has done all these things, but we are thinking of elections we need the democracy for the elect. We need to, you know, employ democracy. But look at what he has done, even if he's a military background, right. You know, why are we many not? By the way, there is some many African who are fighting against even trying to get this young guy out of down as well, like the Museveni who's did to Gaddafi. They are using us Africans to kill our people, because even Sankara, they used Africans to get him down. So I'm wondering, then I'm also wondering about the AU. We had OAU long time ago that was functional. I would think so. I was younger, but I know that it was functional when it came to health, when it came to dispute. What is AU? AU is supposed to be uniting African countries, but to me, I think it's useless to Africa. So my question, I'm sorry, it's a jumbled up questions, but you see the same thing in Uganda, where the dictator is using us Ugandans to kill our own people, to torture our own people. We are even involved in the games so it looks like it's a new trend of gene, or I will call it a new gene in Africans, whereby we don't see ourselves as united as a country. Whatever happens in another country, we don't care. So yet we would have been united together, and for such a young guy in Burkina Faso, that would be the person we rally behind to get Africans together, but we don't see it. So what do you say about that?
Okay.
Sorry, can I just take? Oh,
Okay, I'll wait. No problem.
Yes, Professor, we'll just take one more, and then Godfrey, Robert, you come next, and the others. Sister Marie, or for gender balance, sorry, shall we have Robert do ask, and then Sister Marie, you ask after.
Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for, well, you suggested to call you Comrade Milton.
Yes, fine.
You highlighted about a few issues. China offering $3 billion to Uganda, Libya being betrayed by Museveni. Now, in your walks of life, we've noticed that we've got so much external forces that are kind of supporting our suffering in one way or another. Because if Libya has been denied elections, which means you've got some external forces who've got interests other than the Libya.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Now, we look at this young man, Ibrahim Traore, and I like the way you put it. It's not about the uniform. It's not about how you come across. It's the content that you bring on the table.
Right.
This guy has come in an image of a uniform for the simple reason the uniform has not been a good end result.
Absolutely.
It's past history. But he's trying to change the status quo. But yet again, the external interests don't like it. Because I'm surprised, I don't know, well, you mentioned that so many people came up. I've seen so many, even your crazy guy came up and suggested, I'd like to invite you to the White House. And they say, well, I've got so more serious issues. I think Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, the list endless. I've seen even some US pop stars singing the man. So that's how popular he's been in a very short time. What are we learning out of this? We can see, we can make it, we can do it.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Something holding us back. Now, the question is back to Ugandans. We're seeing all this. We have a young entrepreneur, young agile leader ready to confront. Who's decided to kind of give up his lifestyle for the better of his countrymen?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yet, and we're failing along the line. How have we managed to sabotage this regime's interests? The sabotaging has happened through the people in the diaspora. Believe me or not, what we're doing, the demos, the social media.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got democratic platforms. We're in the diaspora. We can express our feelings. We can talk to these external bodies. How are we going to confront? What measures can we put in place to emphasize, especially when I'm talking about these things, I kind of less involve the people on ground. I love talking to we diasporians who think life is okay in Babylon. They've literally forgotten where they've come from. They've literally decided to sacrifice our people. What can we do to wake up the sleeping dogs? Sorry to use the language. Who think that we're in Babylon and things are okay, especially people who have contacts with legislators around the world.
Thanks, comrade.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. All right. So should I respond now or should I wait?
Yes, Professor. Thank you.
All right. So going back to Mimi's question, and this is very sad, and I like the way that she gave the example of apartheid South Africa. It brings back something which, it's so sad that it's almost, comedic, but it's actually not funny. Very many years ago, before the collapse of apartheid, I was in conversation with, an African-American friend. And he said, I can't stand apartheid, South Africa. It just sickens me every time I see what the European white minority regime is doing to the Africans, And he said, I mean, I hate dictatorship in African countries as well. But somehow I don't feel as bad when I see what they're doing to Africans as compared to what Europeans are doing to Africans. And that is a big problem. And of course, it's very absurd, and it should not be that way, that there are many Africans and people of African descent that feel a special type of rage when the abuse is being inflicted by white people on African people. It is really absurd. And part of it, of course, there's an explanation. Because for centuries, Europeans had dominated Africans during enslavement, for example, during colonialism, and also the way Europeans have demonized Africans for centuries and made so many Africans feel, inferior, right? So they have a particular rage against abuse being inflicted on Africans by Europeans. They don't raise it to the same level of abuse being inflicted on Africans by Africans, which of course is completely absurd, is very hypocritical, because then it shows that you really don't care about human rights per se. Because if you examine yourself, you cannot have that type of contradiction, you see? You're more concerned with the psychological aspect, you see? How dare a European do that to an African? The same European who has been demonizing me as well. So even though I'm in Uganda, in the United States, in Ghana, in Nigeria, I feel that I am that same African in South Africa who's being abused by the European. But I don't feel I'm that Ugandan in Uganda who's being tortured by Muhoozi and Museveni. So we have to speak about that. We have to change this illogic. It's very absurd and very unacceptable type of logic. So now the second aspect of your question, actually, I think Traore is getting a lot more support than opposition, personally, of what I've seen in terms of the on digital media support and in terms of physically. Because as I said earlier, it's not so much supporting him. The person is supporting what he's trying to accomplish in Burkina Faso, and knowing the history, how imperialism has snuffed out any attempt by Africans in the past to take control of their destiny. That is why he's getting that measure of support. So I think there are people who, of course, would oppose, but I think overwhelmingly, if you look on the balance, I think he's getting more support than opposition. And if I left anything out that is important, come back to me on that. So let me go to what Robert said. I agree with you entirely. The power of diaspora. But I am of a slightly different view. I think we've had tremendous impact. I think it's because of the diaspora protest, especially against ECOP, right? The oil pipeline. And then, of course, of people on the ground in Uganda. I mean, listen, remember the last 3 or 4 times that Bobby Wine, President Bobby Wine, did a regional tour. Did you see the numbers that turned out? So, of course, the Chinese officials based in Uganda are watching that as well. You see? So it's a combination of what people do in the ground. And we're not telling anybody to go out there and get yourself killed in Uganda. No, we're not telling them that. But if you can show up in massive numbers together, as has happened, to the extent that now they're blocking the president, Bobby Wine, from going for mobilization in other parts of the country, particularly in the northern part of Uganda, it shows you how terrified the regime is. So that's domestically. Externally, I think we've had tremendous impact. I think as a result of that combination, China is not going to give the $3 billion to Uganda. As a result of the protest, and people can Google this and do the research. Put the question on a Google research. How many banks and insurance companies have pulled out of the Uganda pipeline project? And you'll see all these articles. In fact, there's a website that just ticks them off as they pull out. And that is because of the protest. Now, what we need to do, as I said earlier, first of all, is isolate Museveni domestically in Africa as well. Expose that he's not Pan-African, he's not a friend of Africa, he's an enemy of Africa. He has sold out, he sold out Gaddafi, even though Gaddafi had put billions of dollars in Uganda's economy. We don't know whether that benefited Uganda or it benefited the personal family of Museveni. So obviously we have to even elevate our external activity to the next level, because come the election, which is only in a few months' time, by the way, in January, right? If we get to the election, because I think the regime is so terrified, I don't think they're even confident that they can rig another election, right? But we have to be ready for whatever circumstances arise, either before or after the election. You know, we don't have to tell people in Uganda, domestically, they know what to do. But externally, we have to know immediately what to do, how to engage all these embassies, how to engage all these governments, and how to engage the US government as well, which goes to one point I wanted to make. So the US, they say, you know, Trump is not interested in foreign affairs, particularly Africa, doesn't want to get involved. So there's a plus and there's a minus. The plus, let's be honest, a lot of the destruction that have occurred in African countries occurred during Democratic Party administration in the United States. You know, the conflicts in the Congo, the conflicts in Uganda, the conflicts in Rwanda. We had Democrats in the White House, number one. But what Trump has shown is that he's interested when there are resources involved directly. And there seems to be like direct benefit for the United States. And that's why he's engaged right now in the Congo. Remember, Rwanda was talking about marching to Kinshasa, regime change and all that. You're not hearing that anymore. And that's not going to happen, right? So what the US has done, basically, it's made it clear to Rwanda that we don't want any havoc in Eastern Congo because we're interested in the resources there. And we're going to strike a deal with the government. Now, we know your needs too. You're a tiny country, you don't have the resources, you've been stealing from Congo. But in the course of stealing, you're using violence and people are dying. We don't want that to happen. But we're not going to cut you off completely. So in fact, we're going to be allowing some of the processing to happen in Rwanda. So we will build factories in Rwanda. So it will be a win-win for Rwanda and Congo. Okay, so now this might leave Uganda out of the picture. And when we say Uganda, we're not talking Uganda, really. We're talking Museveni and Muhoozi and the royal family, the Museveni royal family, right? That's what they see themselves as. So our job, and regardless of how you feel about Rwanda, our job right now is to prevent Museveni and Muhoozi of being a part of this deal. And I started doing that by sending you remember that case with Patrick Ho in 2019, 2020, when there was a trial here in the United States. A Chinese national was convicted of bribing Museveni and Sam Kutesa, $1 million, which they split. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was just to open the way. More was to come. So I reminded the White House of this. I said, how can you be working with a guy convicted in a U.S. court of taking a bribe, So those are the kind of things we need to use to isolate Muhoozi and Museveni to make sure they are not a part of this deal. If we lock them out of this deal, we make sure they don't get money for the pipeline, that just strengthens our position as we engage them in the next couple of months as we work hard to get rid of this dictatorship in Uganda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. Guys, just bear with me. Can we have just one moment, a minute of silence, please? Normally
Sure.
this happens at the top of the hour. Thank you. That moment of silence. This is something that we always do. Thank you. Been murdered that as even we discuss this topic, that it's a constant reminder of the curse Uganda continues to endure under Museveni and Muhoozi. Yes, so thank you so much, guys. And of course, we are discussing while people like the Burkina Faso nations are beginning to rise, and under their new leader, Traore, of course, he's bringing hope and courage, and which is something that Uganda remains trapped in fear and violence. So it is something that is good. We are learning about that today, and not just learning, but let us take something away from here. Guys, let's be very brief on the questions. It will be just seconds so that we have enough time to get. So we'll take Marie, you have 1 minute. You all have a minute to ask. Yes, Sister Marie, please go on. How are you? Good to see you. Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I greet you all, comrades.
Hello, Marie.
Professor Almadi. Thank you so much for all these informations.
Thank you.
I have a few questions, but as well some concerns. First of all, I want I mean, this one, I don't know who can answer it. It's just a wondering. In the diaspora, especially Europe, Canada, and America, the people who been demonstrating their the numbers is going down and down. And this moment is the moment where we really, really need powerful, strong demonstrations. All we've been achieving, it came from our demonstrating. And now that the numbers continue going down, I'm wondering. And also, I don't want the people to forget that if that man, that drunk man, if he take over the presidency, we should know that all of us, even in diaspora, we are still on very high risky. Because, for example, like me, when I went to demonstrate at the Uganda embassy in Geneva, Museveni opened the case against me through the through the Interpol. Thank God after I won that case. But ever since that problem happened, I have not been safe. It went so much increasing after my demonstration inside the United Nations, where I confronted Kiyowa Kiwanuka. I'm on very big risk. I don't know what Museveni is doing against me. Wherever I go, I've been taking pictures, I've been recorded videos from every corner, wherever I'm going. Yes, the police are aware, but they can't do anything at this moment. And when you go to confront the person who is doing that, they say, you know, I'm just taking everybody. But you could clearly see that they are targeting me. And you can see there are people who tried even to...
Sister Marie,
yeah,
please.
let me try to come down quick. So this one is I'm very concerned. So this is the one point I'm saying, that in case we leave everything to Museveni to win this, we also in diaspora, we are target. That's one. Secondly, this is a question. Mr. Almadi mentioned about the betrayal about Museveni against to this Gaddafi. Does all the Gaddafi friends and all the Muslims, all Arabs around the world have this proof? Because this need to be shown, need to be shown to them, and also to know how much Museveni is continue killing the Muslims. The last one, the last one. What is the role of this African Union? I'm really wondering what is their roles. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sis. Guys, we will peruse through the questions. Godfrey, please unmute and please be brief. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dorcas. And to Dr. Arimadi, I've got 1,000 questions, but I pick only 2 or 3 out of them.
Sure.
Yeah, my worry is military governments. We have no good example of them on the continent. How could we gain the confidence as to Burkina Faso example? Secondly, could we as Ugandans, those on the ground, emulate what the people of Burkina Faso did to their parliament, in support of Buhari? And the last question, I'll jump to the rest. Qatar is now trying to deal with the government, try to say they are going to invest in Uganda. How can we counteract that so that they don't deal with the military dictatorship?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, brother. Comrade James, please, very fast, come in, and then we roll over to Professor. Professor, I don't know, the text didn't come through. Yes, James, please come in. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, managed to unmute. I hope you'll be able to hear me, because
we can hear you.
I think mine might not be really a question, but a question also as such. How can we fundamentally be effective as the diaspora? That question was important. I get concerned that the United States, for example, Professor, next week, I think in June, we're having about 40 Ugandans who are coming here under the Mandela Washington Fellowship, sponsored by the US Embassy.
Right.
I am wondering how we can use this effectively, because this is civic engagement, as the US Embassy claims. They said here Ugandans to learn, but it's like they don't learn anything. Now, apart from that, if you look at the US ambassador now in Uganda, is almost acting like an RDC. He's almost in every district of Uganda. Impact on Uganda. How can we deal with this? What Ugandans are coming here next week? It's like they can't even mention that they're under dictatorship, but they're coming here, 40 of them. That's indoctrination. So how do we deal with that? Thank you.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you for that.
6 weeks of engagement. 6 weeks of engagement. They're here.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. So should I respond or a few more questions?
Yes, over to you, Professor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, I'm very concerned with what Mary said. I mean, one good thing is that through the 40 years of his dictatorship, he might try intimidation, but I don't think he's gone beyond intimidation of people in diaspora. And part of it, of course, is because the regime is very dependent for its survival on the monies that it gets from these countries, right? But in any case, if Marie is interested, I would like somebody to volunteer to interview her and write about her case and what she has been experiencing in terms of the intimidation. And we would be happy to publish that on Black Star News and make sure that it gets a good attention, just so they are also forewarned and they're put on notice. So I would suggest that, but I think a lot of it is intimidation, as you say, to try to cut the numbers of people that are showing up in these protests. Fortunately, digital protests have become just as powerful as, in fact, in many cases, much more powerful than in-person protests. Of course, it's good to have in-person protests as well. You can get good numbers. People see you out there in front of a establishment. That's always very good. But I hope it does not deter any one of us from engaging in digital protests. So that's what I would say. And I keep emphasizing, I think the digital protests, the in-person protests, collectively, those have had a significant impact. The dictatorship no longer enjoys the reputation that it used to enjoy in all these Western countries. And I think you also had asked about how do we make the Arab countries aware of how Museveni betrayed Gaddafi. You know, unfortunately, many of these countries were also on the receiving end of some very sharp words from Gaddafi. So many of them were not a big fan of Gaddafi because, in fact, he called them out. He, countries like Saudi Arabia, a lot of the Emirates countries, and even Egypt at one point, he accused them of not giving sufficient support to the Palestinian struggle. And he was absolutely 100% correct. And now that he's dead, his allegation has been vindicated. You saw how they just stood aside and watched Israel basically kill from, who knows, 50 to 100,000, mostly civilians. And they did nothing, essentially. So he was correct on that. But he used to criticize them about that. So that's why they were not a big fan of his. But as I said, young people who are supporting the kind of movement they're seeing in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger, they are a big fan. So they need to know that how the way Museveni betrayed Gaddafi, because then they can also, after they become aware of that, they can join us in the struggle against the dictatorship in Uganda. Certainly, they would be much more willing to join our protests and demonstrations, whether it's in person or whether it's digitally. And Museveni knows that too. That's why he still goes around parading and calling himself a Pan-African, so that he's hoping to preempt something like this ever becoming widely known, that in fact he's a traitor. So we should continue working on that. So I think, let me see, Gottfried, yes, of course. As I said in the beginning, when they had the coup in Mali with Goita, I was very highly skeptical. I had conversations with many of my friends, and I was on the opposite end in these conversations, because mine, I would always preface, I would say, if it's military, it has to be Thomas Sankara. Otherwise, I have no time for it. And lo and behold, for the last few years, they have been evoking his legacy and his memory, and they've been trying to accomplish some of the things he was trying to do. And then, as I also said in my presentation, it does not have to be a man in uniform. Look at what the movement is doing in Senegal. They are doing the same thing, and these are people in civilian attire. And of course, that is much the preferable approach. In Uganda, we have a movement that won power, mass movement that won power in 2021, but the Museveni and Muhoozi, they happen to control the armed forces and the police, and that is why the leader of that movement, which of course is President Bobi Wine, was not sworn in as president of Uganda. So in Uganda, we have that civilian movement ready, but at the same time, we should also keep reminding the armed forces that they are our sisters and brothers, and they should protect the good people in Uganda, which happens to be the civilians. They should not go after the wrong target in Uganda. We need to keep reminding them of that. And hopefully, I would like to believe that many of them would listen to that, because they also see what's going on in Uganda. I find it very difficult to believe that they approve of the destruction that is going on in Uganda. And not all of them benefit. There might be a few military senior officers that benefit from what's going on. They get a chunk of the corruption, but I doubt that the majority are benefiting from that. And they too would prefer to see change in Uganda. If they can work with with NUP, the civilian movement, and support the legitimate president of Uganda, who is Bobi Wine, because he won in 2021, and they can support him in the next few months and next year, then of course, it's always good to have that alliance between the civilians and the military. In terms of the question, should we also burn down parliament? I cannot answer a question like that. But I think Ugandans should know that the Constitution of Uganda allows all measures to be taken to restore democracy in Uganda. And anybody who's not familiar with this Constitution of Uganda, you should read the Constitution of Uganda. It allows us the necessary measures to restore democracy. So I would say that we should restore democracy in Uganda using all the available resources that the Constitution of Uganda allows. So that's how I would respond to that question. The Qatar investment, I'm not sure of the detail, but I would be happy to join anybody in any campaign to try to get them to change their mind about that investment. So I would like more details, and I will personally start also a campaign, and then I would like to join other people who are doing any campaign against that. Qatar should know that there's a good reason why China is not giving $3 billion, and Qatar should know that you should invest in the government of the future, which is the government of the National Unity Platform, not the government of the past. Now, in terms of James, well, you know, if you're coming on that fellowship, your hands are really tied. You can't say anything that critical if you're coming on that scholarship, because you might end up, the fellowship, you might end up losing it. So I can see them being in a very tight spot. Now, in terms of the US ambassador, I would like more details on what he's been doing. I've not been following it that closely. What I've been following was that the EU ambassador, Sadek, I think is his name, in Uganda, and he has met with Muhoozi a number of times. And of course, several times I've launched a social media campaign criticizing him for meeting with Muhoozi and not denouncing Muhoozi's terrorism. And what I've done is also I make sure that I send this information to other entities, the Secretary General of the UN, the US Secretary of State, the International Criminal Court. In other words, shame them, make it difficult for them to be meeting and posing with Muhoozi as if business as usual. And let's put it this way. I'm not shocked that after persistent criticism against him, that recently I see now that he and other EU ambassadors have been meeting with NUP as well. So we should never waste a moment when it comes to making it very difficult for these Western establishments and now Qatar, as well, to continue business as usual. Because while some of us are a bit safer outside the country, our sisters and brothers are paying the maximum price in Uganda, being kidnapped by drones, being tortured, being killed, being disappeared. So we should not waste a moment to fight on behalf of our sisters and brothers in Uganda. So I would like to know more about what the ambassador has been doing, and certainly I will make sure that I get involved in criticizing him as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Comrade Tadeo, you raised your hand and lowered it. Please, you have seconds to ask, then we'll have Joe. Yes, Tadeo. Hope I'm pronouncing your name properly.
Yes, thank you very much, comrade. You pronounced it.
Okay. Embedded Ngediwo, Africa, we are rebuilding ourselves. And it's a way to rebuild this continent. Eranga chitino kola kwekujjako abo ba puppet abakolera bannachema puppet abannachemalira abakolera abazungu okwongera okulemaza Africa, okwongera okubba Africa nga tusitula eddoboozi lyaffe ng'omusajja Traore bwakola. Ate nga bisoboka era nga bijja kusoboka. Nawe nga tuyimuse ndugamba ati no ekimala kimala ye.